People who quit a job in the heat of the moment. Which Tshow did you leave them to handle? I got fired, but the ending makes me feel good. I worked in a liquor store for 3 years dealing with all kinds of crap. 1. It was an old building with very poor insulation and heating, so it was very cold every winter. 2. I refused service to drunk customers, as it is law. And 9/10 they'd get angry and yell at me, cursing my family and whatnot. I begged the owners for the power to ban the buttholes but never got any. They didn't even give a warning in the worst cases. They just wanted the money. 3. I worked 6 days a week if I couldn't get a replacement on a Saturday. Sometimes. 4. I opened and closed every workday, ordered and handled new shipment every time, filled the stocks, swept sand and shoveled outside the store and cleaned the inside floor and fridges, counted sales and profit. I did it all. The owners just waited for the profit at the end of each day and I came by with the cash. 5. Never got a raise. No nothing. Never had proper heating installed despite bringing it up every winter. No power to deny the worst douchebags from shopping there again. I got so sick of the lack of respect I started treating the store as my own warehouse on Saturday nights when beer ran out at parties. Employees had a tab, so I just put the beer on mine. Never stole a thing. They got a whiff of it and fired me. The store closed after 3 months because no one else could deal with all the crap. Left an auto parts store the Saturday before they fired the assistant manager and the other key holder for theft. They expected me to take the assistant position for a 50-cent raise, 9.75 total, and work 60-70 hours a week to help keep crap going smoothly. Told me my upcoming vacation to Europe, fully paid for, could no longer happen, and I'd be on call every day and to expect to work every day. Family, school, second job, all on hold, out the window. Didn't matter what was going on. I was to be at work every day. Rather than put up with that, I left my key on the manager's desk and walked out. The assistant manager that was to be fired ended up doing what I did Sunday night after closing. Key on the desk, never came back. The only other key holder was arrested the next week for theft. Never went back. Last I heard, the manager was pulling doubles each day and the butthole district manager was having to go in to help cover shifts. Worked on a farm and one of my biggest duties at the time was to cut down thorn trees and poison the stumps. After several weeks I was told I wasn't fast enough. Never mind the record-breaking heat and working by myself. They hired my cousin's BF the next day after I left. You know what? He quit the very same day and his reasoning was that the work was just too dang much. They didn't know what they had when I busted my tail for them. I got to witness a farmer with help working in hell's heat with a look of crap, this sucks. I used to deliver cookies in college. It was ultimately a pretty sweet gig, pun intended, but the owner was a micromanaging douchebag. On 4/20, our busiest day, I was working a 12-hour shift. No, I didn't have any breaks. Yes, it was illegal. I ended up witnessing an assault. Called the cops. Yada yada. The second I was done giving my statement, I got back in my car and had the biggest panic attack I've ever had. Finally got to the point where I could drive back to the store but was so shaken I couldn't actually communicate to anyone what was going on. My manager luckily figured out something was up and sent me home with 2 hours left on my shift, saying they'd figure something out. I got a text from the owner about 30 minutes after I left because he noticed I clocked out early. I told him everything, including the fact that I still couldn't breathe normally. He asked me who I'd gotten to cover the rest of my shift. I didn't respond to him, but I told my manager I was quitting effective immediately and sent a screenshot of the owner's text as reasons why. Finals week was coming up at the college and I had signed up for at least one shift a day for the entire week and a half. I was a year and a half into the job and one of the most experienced workers at that point because he couldn't keep most employees longer than a few weeks, months. 90% of the people working there had only been there a few weeks. That is, only worked a couple shifts and had no idea where the special deals were, how to work the computer, what the routes were. Frick you, Scott. Me and 5 more of my friends got sick of the management. We would work every single day, early morning till late at night. When we used to ask management, who are supposed to work shifts, to help us with some shifts, especially when we wanted to take vacation, they would tell us no and continue smoking and doing coke outside the restaurant. The weekend they were meant to open 2 new outlets, Me and 5 other friends all left together and took our notice as leave, which meant they had absolutely no one to work on those days. Really do love going and eating there on my weekends off whilst they work their asses off, because no one wants to go work at their stupid place. My dude, they crap in your food. Be warned. I was a grill cook for a steakhouse. I had probably 20-30 different cuts of meat going on the grill, and the shift supervisor asked me to go out and mop the buffet area because someone spilled something. I told her that should probably be a task better suited for the buffet workers since I have to focus on the meat on the grill. She told me the meat is not the priority right now, customer safety is, to which I replied, so you don't care at all about all these customer entrees that are cooking right now? When she said no, I said cool. So it looks like you don't need me anymore. Took off my apron and went home, leaving no one to work in the kitchen that night. The manager called me the next day to get my side of the story, asked me to come back, which I declined, and ended up firing the shift supervisor over the crap show. I started a job building and troubleshooting electronic equipment. I was told I would get a raise after 90 days and again at 6 months. He hired a woman to do all of the wire wrapping for a big order. There were only 2 of us and I asked my boss how she was doing because I did not have time to examine her work. He told she's doing fine, she's really fast. I knew how picky the customer was and the directions they provided for the assembly were very explicit. Sure enough, we finished the project, it's delivered to the customer. The woman who did the wire wrap quite immediately afterwards, everything she had done was rejected. It all got returned to me and it all had to be inspected and then repaired. I spent 3 months getting everything done. I went to my boss and said I was supposed to get a raise. He tells me he did give me a raise and I said it's not in my paycheck. We went around about it and I thought that's it, I'm done. I found another job when I told my boss I needed the next Monday off so I could do my physical for my new job. My boss was P and said you should leave right now. I said you are firing me for giving notice? Cool, and I immediately walked out. Now I was in the middle of fabricating and wiring a pretty large piece of equipment. I heard later when he realized what I left him, he got very angry and was throwing things and screaming. Couldn't have happened to a more deserving guy. Worked in an Indian restaurant when I was 17. Too young to serve alcohol or be behind the bar, but the boss was horrible. Most of us waitresses, bartenders were friends and the same age. He would treat us like crap 1 minute and then be super nice but perverted us the next. On Valentine's Day, we were booked out and getting dozens of takeaway orders. Only 3 wait staff. He started telling us to work faster and we started to make mistakes as we were getting upset. He would scream louder, in front of customers, one by one. He made each of us cry. So, we all walked out. When he came after us, we told him to frick off and deal with his busiest night of the year himself. The look on his face was priceless. Didn't get paid. Didn't care. They were shut down a few months later after multiple illegal immigrant operations kept finding him guilty of hiring and harboring illegal immigrants. Really sad, as the guys we worked with were so nice and just wanted to earn a living. I used to run 4 different stores in a large sandwich chain, which also did catering. 3 of my stores were in hospitals and were fairly busy, and my other one might as well have been a catering only store for the college it was in. There were no customers except catering orders, so I was running around always delivering these catering orders when the chain doesn't even offer delivery. I'm talking $1,000 to $3,000 orders, so they were not small. I used my own personal vehicle and was salaried at the time. I was working 70+ hours a week easy. I hit all my bonus targets and didn't see a bonus in 6 months from any of my stores. I kept being told it was processing. So I had a week-long vacation planned that required me going out of country. They tried to tell me that I couldn't have my paid earned vacation time off an hour before I was scheduled to fly out. I had everything covered so that staff would be fine when I left, but the area manager fricked up and suddenly he couldn't work what he said he would. I told him to have fun with now running 4 stores because I quit and will be contacting a lawyer about my pay. I hung up and left to go to Canada and never came back to the US. Flew 2,000 miles away and started a new life. Funny thing is that a week later I ended up getting a check with all my missing bonus money on it sent to my parents' house. Only job I've ever quit in the heat of the moment was when I was the griller at Sonic. I was 16 and failing most of my classes in high school. I was on day 19 with no days off and the new schedule for the next 2 weeks was posted and I didn't have a day off scheduled. I took my lunch break and never came back. The district manager called me a few hours later and said that was very unprofessional of me. I replied saying that it was unprofessional of management to have a high school student as the only person to work the grill. About 3 years later they closed that location down due to health code violations. Whereas I went on to graduate high school and have had a decent career in IT. Work as a glazier. Boss was a jerk and was making us break union rules. So I quit and reported him to our union hall. He only had a crew of 4, him and myself included. We had 137 showers to install in Wine Country Resort and only had about 2 months to do it. And I was the only one with any experience installing shower doors, so I can only imagine the fuckery that went on after I quit. Worked at an internet company in the late 90s early 2000s as a senior tech. Between myself and 3 other guys, we ran the place. We had all the technical knowledge and did all the back-end work. We had 40k dial-up users, 1,800 websites, business fiber, DSL, wireless long-distance internet, etc. When the dot-com bubble burst, the company went into receivership. The owners just didn't know how to run the business and had no trained accountant that knew what they were doing. All the management was family with no real business experience. But in the beginning, being in an internet business was a license to print money. All of us techs stayed on for the sale of the business. Even though the owners didn't know how to run the business, we had pride in the organization and didn't want to see it die. The company was purchased and we were all offered our current jobs with a moderate raise. This was pretty good as a lot of people in the business were out on the street with nothing. The new owner took all us senior people out for dinner shortly after the purchase to celebrate. The new company's big money maker was selling long distance calling cards and providing the long distance service using the public internet. One of the big selling points was that anyone purchasing the cards would be able to call our helpline and get a support person that spoke their language. This was before phone centers were located outside the US, so the company would hire recent immigrants to man the call centers. The new owner, at this dinner with the senior techs, was bragging about how he had built the company up. He said that he liked to hire new immigrants because they didn't know how much they should be paid and he could pay them tiny wages. When they discovered that they were being paid far less than the minimum wage and complained, he would fire them. There were always more immigrants that he could get that would work for what he was paying. Not one of us returned to work the next day. I worked selling cell phones. I would have customers come in and toss their phones on my desk and tell me to fix it without even looking me in the face. We would have 2 people on registers dealing with customers that would start a line to form up and then get berated for taking too long to resolve a problem. We would have to sell a new service to at least 1 customer a day to meet quota, and the entire store would get reprimanded for failing to push something on a customer that the customer didn't want. The best part about this is that if we managed to get the customer to add a new service, they had 60 days to return, and if they did, then it would come out of our paychecks. One guy got fired for not asking for the exact day that his son was being born off because he put in the wrong dates for his PTO. Like babies are born on the exact day doctors estimate. Days off had to be asked for 3 weeks in advance. One day I had enough after a customer called me stupid for not remembering his phone number out of the hundreds I would deal with every day. I scheduled him and another 20 people to come in for tech service on the same day in the same 2-hour block without telling anyone about it. Friday afternoon just before closing time, I no-called and no-showed that day and sent an email telling them to frick off and leave me alone. Looking back, it was a stupid and immature stunt on my part. My co-workers didn't do anything wrong, but they also didn't do anything to help. If I could do things differently, I would. That was about 10 years ago. I made a promise to never work customer service again. Still haven't. I fully believe everyone needs to work at least 1 customer service job in their life so they know what it's like and how not to treat employees. I worked in various customer service fields for nearly 15 years, and the crap I've seen almost makes me lose hope for humanity. It also made me really hate consumerism. Worked at a small coffee shop that had recently been reopened by a woman whose dream was to own a coffee shop. Ever seen Kitchen Nightmares? Now imagine one of those places sold coffee instead of food. She was an idiot, knew nothing about business or coffee, and she was cheap to boot. She drove away almost all of the old customers from the previous idiot owners, and our new regular clientele was comprised mostly of street people and a few normal people who liked the way I made coffee, although probably not me. I was definitely an butthole barista at the time, which I know didn't help, but in reality my attitude wasn't nearly our biggest problem. I did manage to build a regular group of customers that would actually spend money. I did try really hard to do a good job. I researched how to make the best coffee and espresso. I took the time and did the math to figure out pricing for everything that would drive away the people coming in and camping on a $1 cup of coffee. I told my BF at the time that our slogan was where every hour is homeless happy hour. It encouraged people who would actually spend money to come in, while allowing her to make a profit. I learned to use the coffee roaster and was actually pretty decent at roasting after a while. Every suggestion and complaint from myself and the customers was ignored, but I caught the blame for every aspect of her failing business because I was the only employee. One day I'd had enough and told her I needed to talk to her. We went out the back door and I unleashed. I told her what a freaking idiot she was, what a crappy business owner and just to be in general, and that I was the only thing keeping the business open at that point. I ended by telling her whoever gave you a business loan should be fired, because they are an even bigger moron than you are. By chance, this was one of the few days we actually had a number of customers in at once, and the back door had been open the entire time, so they very clearly heard my tirade. I walked out through the shop, told my regulars sorry, and left. She closed less than 2 months after that. I'm still a little embarrassed at losing control like I did, but it's still really freaking satisfying to know that I was right. Frick you, Shauna. I hope you're still paying that crap off. Back in college I was working part-time at the local KFC Taco Bell, usually a pretty chill place. End of the year is coming up, a bunch of holidays in a short span: Christmas Eve, Christmas, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Our branch manager was going on vacation for the last 2 weeks of the year. On her first day off is when the schedule came out for that time. I was scheduled to work all 4 of those holidays. I brought this up with a shift manager and she told me to take it up with the branch manager, to which I said, you know dang well she's on vacation. How can she change it? We were allowed to switch shifts with anyone without it being a big deal as long as both people agreed obviously and just let the shift managers know. Well, about 40% of our staff was Muslim and do not celebrate Christmas while I am not, and I do. My family was getting together and celebrating on just Christmas Eve that year, so that was the only day out of the 4 I was even trying to switch. Nobody would oblige. So on my last day before the holidays, I told them that if they don't switch me for at least 2 of the days then I will not come in for any of them. They kind of just laughed it off as, yeah right. Christmas Eve comes. It is almost 4 PM, the end of the morning shift and the start of my evening shift. I am at home with my family and I get a call. It is one of the aforementioned persons who would not switch with me and also laughed my statement off. Hey man, where are you? I'm not coming in. I told you and you laughed. You're kidding, right? You on your way? No, I'm not working all 4 holidays and I just asked to switch one and nobody would and you won't switch with me. I hang up. I got about 4 more calls from them before they stopped trying. I never did go back in. I worked at Walgreens and was hired in as a photo tech. Well, before being hired I had to redo their internal test application 4 times because they kept screwing them up. After I was hired they forgot to pay me my first 2 months and fired the guy that was supposed to train me my second day, which left me in charge of all of the photo tech department. So I learned how to run every machine, built a workflow pipeline that other store ended up adopting, and also attended community college. My first vacation, which I told them about before being hired, was in July, and between the 2nd and 7th, I was flying from Michigan to Texas for an event for my senior trip as I had just graduated high school. Well, while I was there they called me and asked where I was. I told them. They said that I had a schedule, and I asked what they wanted me to do about it. They threatened to fire me and I said, "K, but they didn't. I came back and had 2 of my allotted 3 write-ups waiting, which put me on probation. Shortly thereafter a good friend of mine died and I was going to go to his funeral, but my boss wouldn't let me go, so I threatened to sue. She let me go and that seemed to be the end of that until they decided to start scheduling me while I was at school, demanding that I come into work. It was during this time I got a septic infection and nearly died. Failed all my college classes. I am trying to balance work and school and health. I was still the only one who could run the machines in the photo lab and I turned them all off, removed every film canister, picture paper, and took my notes on how to run the machines with me. The best part was my boss running up to me at the door and screaming, "If you walk out that door you're fired." I remember saying, "Yay, that's the plan." All of this happened within about 6 months. I have now worked at a bank and influenced bank policy, had some of the highest customer satisfaction rating in the company, been given special practice, and before I left that position to attend my university full time was promoted 3 times in 2 years. I am now attending a school to be a CG artist and rigger and have a 3.74 GPA. Frick Walmart, Walgreens, and anything from that branch of cuckery. As a song once said, frick you with a fricking anchor. Sprouts Farmers Market. The second store manager I had to work with was awful. Her way or the highway. I had been initially hired for deli, then I was sent to cross-train bakery, because they shared the same space and I had done bakery at Kroger before, which I worked for 2 months because they couldn't hire someone for bakery that would last longer than a week. I then get pulled back over to deli for a week before I get told the news that I would move up front to be a cashier. Why? Because a bunch of new people got hired and their background checks cleared, so they'd be going to bakery and deli. Important to note is that front end did schedules differently than bakery or deli. Bakery and deli each had a calendar where you could just write in what times you needed off. Front end had a form you had to fill out and get approved by a manager before you turned it in 2 weeks beforehand. They always said they wrote the schedule 2 weeks out, but you never got that. So I play her game. I fill out my one request for 1 day off 2 weeks out. I work as a cashier, which was awful. I started having nightmares of being at the register. I was isolated from my friends in the deli bakery. Then the new schedule comes out and I'm not on it. I question all the managers. None of them know anything. So I'll even come back Sunday to see if they add me back on. They did, up front. Working all week, including the 1 day I had asked. I came back the next day to hand in my name badge and discount cards, saying that I quit. The store manager began to flip out at me, stating how much of a mistake I was making. The assistant manager was nice, calmly talking me through what would happen with my last paycheck as I filled out an exit form. I have never returned to that Sprouts, or any Sprouts. A Sprouts is opening in the town next to mine, 15 minutes away. I mentioned it to my so-called teenage son doesn't like his current job. My first job was at a Ruby Tuesday, 16 years old, wanted to be a chef when I grew up. Place made me hate cooking as a job, was lied to about raises pay, given closing shifts while still in high school, left it after 2 years mid-shift. Fast forward a few years, get a job at a New Buffalo Wild Wings. Same location, RT had closed down, same freaking managers. I figure it's been years, crap shoulder changed. Nope, lies and douchebags. What's worse, since it was the newest location, a lot was expected of management, which in turn was put on us. Every night after closing we had to go through a 100+ sheet of details. Staying there a couple hours past close, most of which was just waiting around to be checked out. Cooks were dropping like flies, but they knew it would happen. What started as mandatory part-time became full-time for everyone. So I waited. Another cook who closed every night went back to his union job and suddenly dropped to 2 days availability. I had already spoken up about the retarded list, being lied to about pay. They slapped me in the face with 50-cent raise, so I'd had enough. Come the week the other guy was dropping hours. I came in for my shift, worked my butt off, and closed like normal. I feel kinda bad cause the manager there was and still is a decent guy had to deal with it. But come time for the frickin' list, hey, I'm done, you still gotta be checked out. No, like I'm done. Good luck covering 60+ HRS of closing shifts. Working at KFC when I was younger, I just up and left when we were opening. I was newish and left alone to handle opening the entire kitchen, which takes some time. Accepting a delivery, which in the locale in a shopping mall also took some time. Cleaning and mopping up, prepping first serves and so on and so on. Basically a job for 4 people had to be done by me alone in the time I was supposed to just get the kitchen going. And I got yelled at and name called for not managing to do it. It wasn't the first time either. Anyway, I left them without notice and they realized 20 minutes later that there is no movement in the back and started calling me XD. I worked for a transmission other auto repairs shop for about a year. Extremely underpaid, treated like crap and talked down to all day and expected to do all the work. It was a 2-man shop. Last straw, I was taking trans out of a newer Honda Civic which required to drop the whole subframe etc hours of work, and boss came in yelling what was taking so long, typical name calling stuff like that. I snapped, cursed him out, loaded my box up and quit. He had to end up putting the trans in himself. Took him weeks to find a replacement to underpay. Last I heard his shop IA dying. Freaking butthole. Actually just 3 weeks ago, I was a supervisor for a Midwest manufacturing's truss production plant. I have no problems using their name because they're garbage. For this job we had to punch in and out to go to the bathroom. We had strict quotas and were called morons if we missed anything we messed up came out of our pocket. We had constant cameras watching us to call us on walkies if anyone sat down or took a 60-second rest, etc, and so much more. I was also working roughly 55-60 hours a week of manual labor. The final straw was the week before Easter. My boss told us we had a mandatory overtime weekend, including on Easter. He had no warning given before this and we never had a mandatory overtime day until this point. I had a plane ticket to go visit my family along with the hotel room and multiple plans. I'd requested off and had my vacation approved over a month prior. When I told my boss this, he said, and I quote verbatim, "Either show up or update your resume." I went to lunch and never went back. Quickly found a job as an RGM at a restaurant, so we'll see how it goes. I was working as a guide in a very remote location. There were a lot of last-minute call-ins and roster changes, most of which I accommodated because my family were in another state and I had no life outside of work. 14-18-hour days were fairly standard and nothing to complain about, but I had one trip where the vehicle was hired and needed to be back by a certain time. Except I wasn't told about this time frame until the day of return, when it was physically impossible to cover the distance back to meet the deadline. I said as much to the office staff, who agreed, and I got back at the usual time. The boss called me into his office and laid into me about how useless I was and that really good guides could make that deadline. Well, actually no, unless they were prepared to break a safety rule. You don't take a guided walk around the rim of a canyon in the dark. Sunrise was the usual time of the walk. After the 4-hour walk, there was lunch and a 6-hour drive back to town. I asked him if I looked blue, if I looked box-shaped, if I looked like a freaking TARDIS. Then I said I quit and walked out. I had 2 days before my next trip out and I spent the rest of that evening washing my uniforms and packing my stuff. First thing the next day, I dropped off my keys and uniforms at the office manager's home and I drove straight for home. 3 days away. Apparently Dong boss thought I was just spouting off. He gave it a day and then started blowing up my phone, trying to resolve things, but I was already in the land of no coverage. He eventually called the office manager and asked her to call me, and she told him that I'd completed all necessary steps for employment end and was probably somewhere in the middle of the desert, heading for home. They desperately needed people to fill tour obligations and I have no idea how they managed at short notice, but nobody in the company, apart from Dong boss, held it against me and I'm still friends with a lot of them. I worked as an independent contractor for an engineering company. Since I graduated 2008, there were very few available jobs at the time. I took what I could. Anyway, independent contractor pretty much mean overworked and underpaid per each contract job they gave me. After 5 years I kept being promised to be made full-time employee with benefits. The economy started recovering. They hired more people while keeping me as a contractor. I trained them for the time being. Then the bosses started giving me crap for not wanting to keep working overtime for free. In the middle of the biggest job we've had in a while, my boss decided I was sabotaging the company and said he couldn't trust me. So I said, okay, if you can't even trust me with this, I'm done. I have 2 hours left on that other job contract and I'm done. I walked away. The new hires ran the project to the ground. Not on purpose. Simply way too inexperienced. 3 months later, while I was still looking for a job, they called me and offered me full-time, full benefits, 2x the hourly I was making. Turns out I couldn't be as easily replaced as they wanted me to be. Less in the heat of the moment, more like exactly the right people to leave. My fiance and I worked at the same place, a corporate chain franchised by his aunt. I've made a few posts about this evil hag before, but for this post, we'll focus on how much he took advantage of us. My fiance was the regional manager for the area. He was also tech installation and support, hiring manager, inventory manager for all 8 locations, and a sales rep. He was required to make and know every password to every account and bit of software. He was the only one who knew how to operate the cameras. He fixed every piece of tech that broke, saving our boss thousands of dollars, even after he got demoted for not doing something very illegal. The only thing that changed was his pay rate, because he had so much to do and our boss refused to let him train anyone else to help him. I would use his code to manage inventory since I was often working at the hub location. I quit about a month before he did, which means the company lost their inventory manager. My fiance started standing up for himself and refused to do inventory since his title was sales rep. I tried to convince him to only do the work of a sales rep, but he didn't want to screw over his co-workers, so he still helped with everything else. Their inventory went to crap. Tens of thousands of dollars worth of devices were missing, at the wrong location, still at the warehouse, not scanned in the tracking program, or legitimately missing. When he quit, the company was in some real trouble. Since he was the only one who knew the passwords for most of the software, the passwords left with him. He was the only one who knew how to fix the garbage computers. So each storefront was down a register after a couple weeks. The cameras were basically for show, since no one else knew how to operate them. Since there was no longer a buffer between female Satan and the employees, the already high turnover rate tripled. Printer nozzles clogged, printer tossed out and a new one bought. Employee gets sick and has a doctor's note. Employee is fired and each location has one sales rep. Half the locations don't have managers. We honestly don't know how the stores are still functioning. When he left without a notice, he made it very clear that he would do absolutely nothing to help out anyone. That was over 7 months ago and he still has people calling to ask for help with something. Once he started sharing the crap that went down there, our boss was essentially disowned by the rest of the family. The friends we made while working there have all left and are in better places. All in all, a win for us and a big L for the woman who made our lives heck for a year. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.